I can frame a house in 6 weeks. I can get that once foundation is poured, I can get a house up ready to go in 6 weeks. I could build, and builders like myself, we could build a huge amount of housing, but we can't even get to the point where we can build. And in the rural areas where we need the housing the most, developers like myself have looking outside the box to see how do we not connect to municipal infrastructure so we can actually build.
Alexa Lavoie for Urban News, and today is the last report, but not the least, about the blatant bureaucratic problem that construction companies experience daily. Justin Trudeau announced in June 2021 the creation of 4,500 new affordable housing units across the country through an additional $1.5 billion investment through the Rapid Housing Initiative.
At the same time, we'll crack down on the predatory speculators that stack the deck against you. So no more blind bidding. No more foreign wealth being parked in homes that people should be living in. And to get 1.4 million Canadians in a new home in the next 4 years, we'll work with municipalities to get more homes built or renovated. It's not okay that the communities you grew up in aren't in places you can build a life, raise a family, or grow old. It's because the deck is stacked against you. So we have a plan to help fix that, so you can live in the communities you love.
But this housing crisis is caused directly by Mr. Trudeau Gatekeepers, who are making honest companies discouraged by endless bureaucracy to build houses, some of which are already promised. A government that slowed down rural development with a growing demand for housing and an influx of migrants who have no choice but to stay in hotel at taxpayer expense or in shelter for the homeless. Trudeau bureaucracy creates substantial problem, but many prefer to close their eyes to the subject. In order to fight bankruptcy, some companies have to fight to court in order to be able to bring their project to an end. And this is the case of Sundance Construction, a 26-home project in the Sandy Hook area of Manitoba that turned into a nightmare and an economic sinkhole. Today, in this last episode, Jocelyn Burswick, CEO of this company, explained the procedure that the company had to undergo and that they are still undergoing at the current time in order to get their subdivision of land approved. We discuss also how this whole system is broken.
For every month that I don't build, it costs us $350,000. So 9 months of not building, that's a lot of money, probably about $1.6 million right now. The legal costs alone that I've had to take on just to deal with these delays, dealing with putting this about $30,000 in legal. It'll probably be another $50,000 in legal. So that's, by the time that's said and done, that's probably $50,000, $80,000 that never needed to be spent. But not only do I have to pay for my cost for legal, the RM of Gimli is making me pay their costs. As part of the development process, they charge the developer their legal costs. Every time they do up a draft of a developer's agreement that doesn't even meet a legal standard of competence, I get the bill for it and I have to pay for it. It blows your mind. And I was furious with this. I said, I don't mind paying for legitimate costs in the process, but because they did this, the RM of Gimli has no incentive whatsoever to get through the process quickly and to not incur costs, because they're not incurring costs. The contractor is.
And what about the people who are waiting for the home that they were supposed to have?
Well, what I'm doing right now is I helped all of my homeowners get into temporary homes. So they're renting. Every single one of them is renting. And in the Gimli area, that can be an average of $1,400 a month. And I'm paying a portion of that because my homeowner shouldn't have to pay it. And I'm going to do whatever I can to try and recover those dollars and cents. I'm storing their belongings here. I bought extra sea containers to be able to store some of those belongings here for them so that they don't incur costs. But I'm incurring costs. And every time I buy a sea container and have it delivered, that's almost $7,000 in cost to me. And one sea container might handle one home. So so I am looking after all those belongings that are being stored on site. And then I have to add on the engineering costs. Well, every time they ask me to go back and redo something or add on to the engineering right now. So for an engineering project, like something along this line shouldn't have cost me more than maybe $15,000. Well, right now I'm sitting at about $40,000 in engineering costs because I have to keep going back. I have to keep going back to say, okay, guys, they've asked you to change this, or we need to do a report on this, or we need to do more soil testing. And now we need to hire, wetland experts, and we have to do all of these different things. And now we have to get more guys out here. We got to do more surveying. So, and that doesn't even cover my surveying costs. So now instead of having a survey out here 3 times, I've had the survey out here 6 times. And then they're just the delay in the process. So when you get forced to look after building supplies, I have to store building supplies, I have to store windows and doors that I've already pre-purchased and have sitting here ready to go, trusses, everything else sitting here. I think I have about $500,000 worth of building supplies just sitting here in storage, waiting, ready to go.
So at the end of the day, your project, are you going to finish in deficit?
Yes, like this project is approved. So in the end, nobody can truly stop me from building. I mean, they can delay me and they can drive my costs up, but they can't actually stop me. And that's they've engaged in the process knowing that they can delay me and they can drive up the costs for my homeowners, and force them into, well, guess where my homeowners are staying right now? Airbnbs, because there's no long-term rentals around here in the Gimli area. And as this whole thing kind of starts to balloon, my homeowners are taking up rental space that could be available for other people. And they're trying to regulate Airbnbs and they're going to drive that market out of the area.
What you will say when we heard Mr. Trudeau saying that he wants to build 4,200 new home and he actually inject some million of dollars, but we see some independent contractor having as much trouble as that?
I'd say he's on glue. It's not possible. What he is saying on a federal level is not possible. And I'll give you some examples of why it's not possible. When this problem with me happened here on a municipal level, the federal government injects money into these municipalities directly from federal government to municipal government. The Canada, Manitoba infrastructure grants and things like that. They have a lot of programs they can do, and they could have put strings on it to say, we want to see better performance and less red tape in housing in your municipality, and we will fast track this money. But there is nothing along those lines. There was nothing that you can do. So when I went to, and this is the conversations I've talked with, and this is both sides of the fence. I've actually given all this information to Pierre Poilievre. I've given this information to my local MP, James Bazan, and I've met with him in person regarding what's going on here. I have shared this information with my MLA, who is conservative in my area, And same thing. I have a conservative government, which is supposed to be pro-business. But again, it's like they are blocked. It's not even a matter of just the gatekeepers right now, because the gatekeepers truly exist. Pierre Poilievre was on the mark. They exist, they're there, and they are eating up all of this cash that is supposed to flow down into these projects. And we're never going to get these houses built. Like as a builder, like right now I'm working on a building project just on the north side of Winnipeg, and they're doing infill housing, side by side, 5 feet apart, put them up, duplex housing, and each house is sold faster than you can build. I can frame a house top to bottom, roof on, Tyvek, windows and doors in. I can frame a house in 6 weeks. I can get that once foundation is poured. I can get a house up ready to go in 6 weeks. I could build, and builders like myself, we could build a huge amount of housing, but we can't even get to the point of where we can build. And in the rural areas where we need the housing the most, developers like myself have looking outside the box to see how do we not connect to municipal infrastructure so we can actually build. And we come up with solutions, and the local municipalities, they just throw their hands up in the air and they approve, and then they let it sit. And it makes no sense. So Trudeau government, if they had been serious about this, they would have already been going through housing, through infrastructure, and they would have been saying to the department heads, hey, let's start telling municipalities to start tying these grants to increased housing. Let's see some statistics on housing. But I've also had high-level federal talks with ministers in terms of Indigenous services. I've also had high-level talks in terms of housing and these type of sustainable developments on the conservative side. And the willingness for anybody to talk on both sides of the aisle is really tough. Like, you can get to the conversation point, but the follow through is simply not there. And on the conservative side, they tell me is that they can only do so much because they're not sitting in government. And that is true. That is absolutely 100% true. But there is still more they can do. And that means is that what they're not doing is they're not doing constituency level advocating. That needs to happen. They need to stop worrying just about what happens in Ottawa. They need to start worrying about what's happening in their individual constituencies, because we're not going to make it while we wait for them to take the seat of government. So all these MPs actually need to start doing their job, and they need to start doing it better at the local level when they're back in the community. People like myself have to keep fighting, and we'll keep fighting, we'll keep building. But as this problem gets worse, and we get into more and more housing crunches, it's going to get bad. Like right now, if you were to drive around in my area, you would see how many people are living in garages, how many people are living in a winterized RV. In Manitoba, at -44, -45, we get down to, people are converting RVs to live in because there's no housing available. Then you don't have proper ventilation, you deal with other things that are going on, and you're living in situations that are really bad. I see people right now in my area living in condemned houses. I see people living in situations where there are 4 or 5 kids in that home, and it is a bad situation.
The story of Jocelyn Burswick is one of many, because many companies need to follow the same path to see their project to be approved by the bureaucracy layer of the liberals. If you think that it was important to show you the other side of the story of Jocelyn Burswick, please go over rebelfieldreports.com. On this website, you can donate generously to help us to continue to cover this kind of story, because it's important that we show you the other side of the story.